Coming out of high school, he was a 6-foot-tall, 180-pound offensive lineman who was about to lead Arkansas to their only ever national championship. Once he finished college, he took a $1 million loan from an organization with ties to the mafia and almost bought the San Diego Chargers before his dad talked him out of it. But then, seemingly overnight, Jerry Jones became the most famous owner of the richest team in all of sports. Just a few years after, he was failing to open a chain of pizza restaurants in Missouri. So how did he get here? And what was Jerry's secret to turning a team that was losing $1 million per month into the most valuable sports franchise in the world? Because there was a specific strategy that he used to do something that everyone thought would be impossible, and he did it in record time. Well, we're about to find out, because this is the story of the improbable rise of Jerry Jones, owner of the Dallas Cowboys. Gerald Wayne Jones was born in 1942 in Los Angeles, California, to Pat and Arminita Jones. At the time, the Joneses lived in LA to support the war effort, with Pat building aircrafts in a factory. But by 1945, the young family moved to North Little Rock, Arkansas, where Pat opened a grocery store aptly named Pat's Supermarket. Now, the Joneses didn't come from money, which meant their family of 4 lived in the apartment above the store. But Pat's natural showmanship helped the new supermarket become a local sensation. Jerry recalls his dad wearing a white cowboy hat and suit as he strutted around the sales floor. Pat even built a stage right in the middle of the store where he regularly hosted radio broadcasts, bands, and talent shows. Pat was even quick to let Jerry in on the family business, dressing the then 9-year-old up in a bow tie to greet customers at the door. And by 1958, the family had 2 stores and had become a fixture of their community. But then one January night, it all came crumbling down. The Joneses awoke to the news that their second store had burned down overnight to a faulty outlet. Luckily, the insurance company was able to cover most of the damages, but Pat took it as a sign. However, before making his next move, he let Jerry finish high school in Little Rock, where he was an all-state running back. Jerry was even talented enough to get recruited to play in college, although growing up in the state, there was only one real option: playing at Arkansas. So in 1960, as Jerry headed off to college, his parents moved to Springfield, Missouri, where his dad would take over as president and chairman of a life insurance company called Modern Security. And just as he had immediate success running a supermarket in Little Rock, Pat took Modern Security's assets from $440,000 in 1961 to $6.2 million in 1965, amassing a huge fortune for himself along the way. Meanwhile, Jerry was having a fair amount of success of his own in college. Upon arriving at Arkansas, the 6-foot, 182-pound high school running back made the switch first to fullback and then eventually to guard. And while he was undersized in almost every game he played, he didn't let that stop him from becoming a captain on the undefeated 1964 national championship team, the only championship team Arkansas has ever had. Coaches described Jerry as quick and determined, as he took on defensive linemen who weighed 50 pounds more than him. And his senior year, Jerry was even named to the all-conference team. But as his teammates noted, even though Jerry was good at football, it seemed to often take a backseat to his other side hustles, which included selling shoes, life insurance, and even tickets to his own games.
I would get those from usually the freshman girls' dormitory, and they could buy a ticket for $1. The face on them was $7, but we were so good as a team, those tickets went for $20. And so, but the problem is that you had to be a student to get in. Well, before the game, I would get all taped, ready to go. And if I'd sold about 20 of them, whether it was in Fayetteville or Little Rock, Arkansas, I'd have to go out to the players' gate and lead all the people through the gate that I'd gotten in. They had a seat because of the ticket. I'd walk them across the end zone and lead them up in the stands. Then I'd come back in and get my equipment on, get ready to play.
After graduating college, Jerry knew that he wanted to follow in his parents' footsteps and start a business of his own. The only issue was he didn't know what kind. Nevertheless, in 1965, Jerry borrowed $1 million from the Teamsters Union, an organization which had strong ties to the mafia and whose president, Jimmy Hoffa, was even later thought to be killed by the mob. And he took the money to open a string of Shakey's pizza parlors in Missouri. But just 1 year later, and all of his restaurants had failed. So he took a job as the executive vice president of his dad's insurance company at a healthy salary of $35,000 per year. In today's money, that's over $345,000 at just 22 years old. But Jerry wasn't done trying to make a name for himself, which eventually led him to the doorstep of a recently formed football league called the AFL. See, it was always Jerry's dream to own a professional football team, and he had recently heard that the AFL's San Diego Chargers were about to be up for sale. The price, a whopping $5.8 million, and Jerry even had a $1 million line of credit with the Teamsters Union that he was prepared to use. There was just one problem. Not only were the Chargers bleeding money, but the entire AFL seemed to be on the brink of collapse. However, the prospect of owning his own professional football team at just 22 years old was too enticing. That was until he ran the idea past his dad.
I was talking to my father and he said, "Son, by your own admission, this doesn't work economically. There's no money coming in and a lot going out." And I said, "But Dad, this is my lifelong ambition." And he said, "You hadn't been around long enough to have a lifelong ambition." He said, "I'm trying to talk to you realistically, Jerry. If it doesn't work, I hate to see you as a young man just right off the bat get in something that financially doesn't work." And so he talked me out of it.
However, that decision to not buy the team actually proved to be a mistake, because less than a year later, the team sold for $11 million after the NFL and AFL announced that they would be merging, which really upset Jerry, because not only did he pass up on what might be his only opportunity to fulfill his dream, but the price to do so seemingly just doubled. So Jerry went back to the drawing board, and in 1971, he struck gold, somewhat literally. See, that same year, Jerry had started Jones Oil and Land Lease, and acquired the rights to drill for oil and natural gas at 13 different sites across Arkansas. And by some wild stroke of luck, he struck oil at each of his first 13 sites. This made him a millionaire overnight. But his wealth really exploded in 1974 when the US instituted the Arab oil embargo, which sent gas prices soaring and lined Jerry's pockets. But nothing paid off more than a deal he struck in 1982, which set the course of NFL history forever. The story goes that Jerry struck a deal with an old friend to buy half interest in his utility company. This deal stipulated that the utility company could only buy its gas from Jerry's drilling company, and it had to be at the price of $3 per unit. Now, you don't have to know much about the oil and gas business to know that in the early 1980s, the price per unit of natural gas dipped as low as 16 cents, meaning Jerry was charging almost 2,000% more than anyone else. And this deal helped explode the value of his company, which led to him selling his interest in his friend's utility company years later for $140 million, the same amount of money he needed to buy a football team that was about to come on the market. Now, this utility company was later sued by its customers for price gouging, and it was ordered to pay $13.7 million in damages. And while Jerry was never found to have done anything illegal, he did successfully get out of the oil business what he had gotten in it for in the first place.
In 1988, I was on a fishing trip with my son in Mexico, and for some reason, the next morning I got up, I was feeling pretty rough. I don't know why, but I was drinking a lot of coffee. And I was reading the paper when I learned that the Dallas Cowboys were for sale. I found a phone in the lobby and I got someone on the other end of the connection, and I said, "You don't know me from Adam. My name is Jerry Jones. And if I live to make it back to the United States, I'm gonna buy the Dallas Cowboys."
Now, Jerry Jones did make it back to the United States, and he did end up buying the Dallas Cowboys for $140 million. Which was the highest price ever paid for an American sports franchise at the time. But Jerry wasn't buying the ultra-valuable franchise that we know today. In fact, when he bought the team from fellow oil baron H.R. Bum Bright, the team was losing $1 million per month. And while the Cowboys had been dubbed America's team for all of their success in the 60s and 70s, fans had grown tired of the team's mediocre performance over the past decade. But Jerry was confident he could get the team back on track, seeing their issue as a simple math equation. The team had too much money going out and not enough coming in. So he got to work on solving both problems, starting with cutting costs. See, since the team's creation in 1960 until Jerry bought the team in 1989, the Cowboys only ever had one coach, Tom Landry. And while he had led the team to 2 Super Bowls in the 1970s, the team hadn't been relevant in over a decade. Not to mention GM Tex Schramm had also been with the team since 1960 and had essentially been given a blank check to run the team however he saw fit. This resulted in extremely bloated costs across the board. So when Jerry came in, it was obvious what he had to do. He immediately fired Landry and replaced him with his old teammate and then Miami head coach Jimmy Johnson. He then fired Schramm and assumed full control over football operations himself as owner and now general manager. And even though fans had been calling for a change like this for years, they were upset with how suddenly the new guy did it, not even discussing the decision with Landry before announcing he had been fired. This earned Jerry a bad reputation among the fans early on, which was only made worse when in the first season under Jimmy and Jerry, the team went 1-15. However, the following year in 1990, with the 17th overall pick, the team selected Florida running back Emmitt Smith, who proved to be the final piece this young team needed to turn things around. Smith, along with Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin, who had been drafted in each of the previous 2 years, made up an offensive core that was the youngest in the league, not to mention one of the cheapest. And by 1992, the Cowboys won their first of 3 Super Bowls under Jerry Jones, only to repeat the following year. And even after an ugly dispute between former teammates resulted in Jimmy Johnson leaving the team after winning back-to-back Super Bowls, the team got right back on track in 1995 after Jerry hired another former teammate of his, Barry Switzer, to lead the team to their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. Naturally, this success increased the value of the Cowboys immensely. But even Jerry couldn't have expected to recoup his initial $140 million investment in less than 10 years of owning the team. In fact, by year 5 of owning the Cowboys, they had become the most valuable franchise in all of sports. However, even then, they were only worth $272 million, a far cry from the over $9 billion they're worth today. So how did Jerry increase the value of his team 33 times over in 27 years while winning just 5 playoff games during that time? Well, according to many, he did it by becoming the NFL's shadow commissioner. When an NFL agent was asked in 2022 who the most powerful man in the NFL was, he didn't name a player or even Roger Goodell. He said it is, without a doubt, Jerry Jones. And nowhere was this more evident than in 1993. See, just 4 years after entering the NFL as its newest owner, Jerry cut a deal with an up-and-coming TV network to help them win the rights to broadcast NFL games. This deal turned out to be especially important because at the time, the big 3 networks were trying to convince the NFL to take less money on their next TV contract than they did the year prior because of a perceived lack of interest in the sport. And when it came time for CBS to renegotiate their deal to air NFC games, which included Jerry's Dallas Cowboys, the network offered a $15 million pay cut from their last deal, claiming they could only break even if they paid the league $250 million per year instead of their previous $265 million figure. But Jerry wasn't having it. He believed in the value of the league, and he knew he could find someone to outbid one of the big 3. So he called up the founder of a 7-year-old upstart network called Fox and gave them the chance to outbid the incumbents. And they did, which resulted in CBS not airing any NFL games for the first time in league history. Fox stole their TV rights by signing a 4-year, $1.6 billion deal that was 60% more than CBS was offering. But Jerry didn't stop there, because after winning his 3rd Super Bowl, he decided to take a swing at the league itself. See, in 1995, the league split all sponsorship and merchandise revenues evenly. This meant that even though the Cowboys brought in 25% of the merchandise revenue that year, they received the same 1/30th cut as everyone else. Jerry obviously disagreed with this, so he reached out to Phil Knight at Nike and struck a deal to have the company sell officially licensed cowboy gear. There was just one problem. The merchandise the league sold was made by Nike's competitor Reebok, and they weren't happy that one of the NFL's teams was now directly competing with them. But Jerry wasn't done, because he also signed a 10-year, $40 million deal with Pepsi to be the official soft drink of the Dallas Cowboys, even though Coke already sponsored the NFL. And then to top it off, he signed on American Express to sponsor his team, even though the league already worked with Visa. In total, it's estimated that Jerry signed over $60 million worth of contracts with direct competitors of league sponsors, which obviously didn't make the NFL too happy. So in response, the league sued the Cowboys for $300 million in an attempt to bar Jerry from signing another deal like this again. But Jerry countersued for $750 million, claiming that each one of the 30 NFL teams could market their names and logo better than the league could. And after a 15-month legal battle, Jerry came out on top, not only allowing him to keep his current deals, but permitting him to sign new ones in the future, regardless of who already worked with the league. This move alone has been credited with exploding the values of every team in the NFL, not just the Cowboys. In 1995, a year before Jerry won his lawsuit against the NFL, the average valuation of a team was just $160 million. But by 2004, the average value had jumped to $733 million, far outpacing every other American sports league. Since Jerry bought the Cowboys, the NFL has become the most valuable sports league in the world, and for his work as shadow commissioner, his personal net worth has skyrocketed to $14.4 billion, making him the 7th richest owner in the National Football League. Since 1994, the Dallas Cowboys have not given up their title as the world's most valuable sports franchise, now being valued at over $9 billion. Certainly a far cry from losing $1 million a month and being taken over by the son of a supermarket owner.